Residents of occupied Crimea are posting videos of the bombings in Feodosia online. There, Ukrainian forces struck a marine oil terminal last night. This information was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. They clarified that this is a multifunctional complex that supplies petroleum products to the occupying army. A large-scale fire broke out there, a fire. Drones struck the ammunition depot of the separate logistics battalion of Russia's 18th Combined Arms Army. This is also in Crimea. In addition, last night, one of the largest explosives manufacturers in Russia, the Sverdlov plant in the city of Dzerzhinsk, was hit. The General Staff reports that the enterprise is capable of equipping virtually all types of munitions, aviation and artillery shells, aerial bombs, warheads for guided missiles, and warheads for air defense missile systems. Online sources report that the plant is the only producer of octogen and hexogen in Russia. The Russian economy is heading into an abyss. Of course, there is still some margin of safety left. The empire won't collapse tomorrow, but the destructive factors are becoming increasingly obvious. First and foremost, we should thank the Ukrainian drones, which fly into oil depots or refineries in Russia almost every day, having already destroyed 40% of the oil refining capacity. It has gotten to the point where the country known as a gas station has lined up its people in long, endless queues and is now asking China and Belarus to help it with fuel. Markets are falling, industry is stagnating, everyone is in the red, only prices are rising. The Russian authorities have cut spending on every third state program, the ones they announced so pompously. Interestingly, even the annexed territories have come under these cuts. But most importantly, and Russian economists are writing about this, for the second time this year, the Kremlin has been forced to recapitalize the main bank of the Russian military-industrial complex, Pромsvязьbank. It has liquidity problems, and the defense enterprises that take out loans there simply cannot get money for weapons. And that is definitely good news about our enemy. Christina Havrish will tell you about other signs of stagnation in Russia, which are slowly but surely undermining the enemy's strength.
Kilometer-long lines at gas stations and zeros on the price boards. For more than a month now, there has been an acute shortage of gasoline in temporarily occupied Crimea, and the situation is getting worse.
This line is for a gas station where there's still a chance for gasoline. I'm talking about gasoline at the gas stations. Give us some gas, guys!
The most popular types 92 and 95 octane are being sold with ration cards. And starting from October 1st, only 20 liters per person.
Aksionov promised gasoline, but the situation is a complete mess. Right now, it's hard for Crimea to buy it with cash. Anyone who comes, make sure to get gasoline coupons right away.
What's going on here? I just can't understand. What kind of life is this? What is this?
Only with coupons. We're standing in line like in the USSR.
Dry gas stations can be found in every fourth region of Russia. Here are the lines in Khabarovsk Krai, and this is the Moscow-Yekaterinburg highway.
I counted 130 cars ahead of us.
In some places, even 95 octane disappeared, even in Moscow.
Our vital oil depots are currently being attacked, and as a direct consequence, there are significant disruptions in the overall supply chain.
Ukrainian drones visit Russian oil depots and refineries almost every night. In August, they hit 14 out of 38 oil refineries. In September, at least 8 more were hit. Some drones come to certain sites as if they're coming home. One of the largest in Russia, the Ryazan oil refinery, has already been hit 5 times, while the Volgograd and Syzran refineries have each been hit 4 times.
Now that was a blast!
And here's a fresh fire show. Yes, last night the oil depot in Feodosia was burning once again.
We're talking about a systematic approach here, and it remains in place. The refinery was hit. When one unit stops working, the others keep running. They shift the load over there, then to the second unit, and after 3 weeks they return to the first one once it's been partially restored. The Russians invested money and resources and repaired it.
And this tactic yields impressive results. By the end of September, 38% of Russia's primary oil refining capacity was out of operation. According to the Russian agency SIAL.
This is calculated for the entire territory of Russia. If we consider only the European part of the world, the potential production loss could realistically reach more than 50% of the total output.
Moscow is capping prices at gas stations, but this only makes the situation worse. Small gas stations are closing down so as not to operate at a loss. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has banned the export not only of gasoline, but also of diesel. From being a fuel exporter, the gas station country is turning into an importer. They are asking Belarus to increase supplies.
The calculation is as follows. Ukraine would never dare to attack a Belarusian oil refinery, but I think that unmanned systems are already capable of countering this tactic that the Russian Federation wants to use.
They are even ready to deliver gasoline from China, South Korea, and Singapore. To keep it from becoming as expensive as gold, they are cancelling import duties. And part of the price will also be covered by the budget.
Every day, the Russian budget will have to provide subsidies to keep gasoline prices at a normal level, approximately $30 million, every truly single day.
Meanwhile, the deficit in the Russian budget this year is already 5 times higher than planned due to a decrease in oil and gas revenues. And that's not even the final figure.
This year, the deficit will be between 5 and 7 trillion, according to their estimates, and we're only just finishing the first 9 months of this year, while the peak expenditures usually fall in December. Therefore, in our estimation, most likely they won't even manage to stay within that 5 to 7 trillion.
In the 2026 budget, the deficit is officially set at 4 trillion rubles. And these are the worst figures since the 90s. It won't be possible to cover the gap with external borrowing.
Absolutely everyone has refused Russia. China refused, the BRICS countries refused, and of course all international organizations refused as well. So the only resource they have left is internal.
In order to find money for the war, the Kremlin resorted to an unpopular decision, raising VAT from 20 to 22%.
This is a tax that is directly passed on to end consumers, so it will affect final prices, which will rise even further.
It will also hit small businesses, those who use the simplified taxation system. Anyone with an income above 10 million rubles will have to pay VAT. Currently, only those whose income exceeds 60 million pay it.
This is essentially the death of the simplified taxation system.
Despite the Kremlin's attempts to hide the situation, the Russian economy is indeed in bad shape, and the new tax measures are further proof of that.
These are the kinds of things the Russian government has avoided doing because they pay a lot of attention to public opinion, which, as we can see, is much more sensitive to the state of their refrigerators than to the deaths of their loved ones.
Sectors of the economy not related to the war have fallen by 5% this year. Factories are switching to a 4-day work week. More and more businesses are going bankrupt and shutting down. And this is only the beginning.
I'm not going to say that, in half a year the Russian economy will collapse into hell, but the trend has definitely turned downward.
The main thing is that Russia isn't saved once again by petrodollars. And here it's important that the sanctions from our defense forces are reinforced by effective Western restrictions on Russian oil exports. Then it will be even harder for Putin to finance the war. Kristina Havrish, Alexander Nazarenko, Fakti, ICTV, United News.
Economic activity is declining in Russia. The downturn in industry has continued for the 4th month in a row, and the services sector has shown its worst results since December 2022. This was reported by the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. Due to the reallocation of resources in favor of the military-industrial complex and the army, the Russian economy has fallen into a deep stagnation. The Kremlin dictator is still trying to convince Russians that their lives are getting better. But it's simply impossible to ignore the real state of affairs anymore. My colleague Natalia Gusak will continue on this topic.
The growth of the Russian economy has come to a halt. Oil revenues are decreasing every day, and the budget deficit has broken records for the past 3 decades. Russian ministers and bankers admit the Russian economy is in deep crisis.
We have our own problems, obvious problems. It's the budget. The military budget, it will remain like this for another, say, 5 to 8 years. Because what do they do after a war ends? They prepare for the next war. That's a normal phenomenon. Restocking supplies, new weapons, restoring infrastructure that has been destroyed one way or another. So to say, well, let's just endure for another year, then there will be peace, and then the budget will return to what it was in 2021. That's an illusion. How would it return to 2021 levels? It won't return.
There's nothing to compensate for the record budget deficit. Revenues from energy exports are declining, while the appetite of the military-industrial complex is growing. So instead of cutting spending on continuing the war against Ukraine, the Kremlin is increasing pressure on businesses and Russian citizens. At the Valdai Forum, Putin spoke about raising VAT from 20 to 22%. And just a month ago, he insisted that there was no need to raise taxes. Experts believe that raising VAT will lead to a surge in inflation, a reduction in money circulation in the economy, a decrease in the population's purchasing power, and an even greater slowdown in the country's economic development. Putin has inadvertently created an economic situation from which it will be difficult for Russia to escape by adopting a policy aimed at increasing Russian society's dependence on military spending, through significant investments in the Russian defense industry, while Russian society faces labor and gasoline shortages, broader demographic problems, and declining savings. From a report by the Institute for the Study of War, the fuel crisis in Russia continues to grow. Now lines for gasoline have formed in the Altai Krai region. In the city administration of Biysk, officials blamed the shortage on the Russians themselves. They claim that people created a panic on social media, and that's why there's not enough fuel. In reality, all of this is the result of the effective work of Ukraine's defense forces, who regularly and successfully attack oil refineries in the aggressor country. Refineries are shutting down for repairs. Production volumes have dropped significantly. Russia's energy sector is essentially a powder keg, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation under Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council. After all, instead of investing in the modernization of thermal and hydroelectric power plants, Moscow is losing its reserves due to sanctions and aging equipment. 42 regions of Russia are already imposing electricity consumption restrictions during peak hours. The center, Siberia, the Far East, everywhere is experiencing an energy shortage. And that's without any capacities being knocked out. Losing oil refineries will seem like a walk in the park for Russians compared to this. At the same time, under Kiriyenko's supervision, Rosatom is building nuclear power units in Ethiopia and Burkina Faso. In other words, money is being funneled into projects that will never pay off, while Russian cities are being pushed toward blackouts. Sanctions have already dealt a blow. There are no reserves, and the infrastructure is deteriorating. There is no exit plan. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. Russia has still not managed to solve the problem of acute drinking water shortages in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. In Kharkiv, the Olkovskoye reservoir has almost dried up. The water that used to be supplied to people on a schedule has stopped being pumped altogether. The Starokrimsky reservoir, which supplied water to Mariupol, is also nearly empty. Only about 15% of the water remains there.
To these shortages, we must also add a shortage of people. The armed forces of Ukraine are also at work. There is also a significant shortage of essential ammunition and crucial weapons. And this particular aspect depends on finances. And now some very good news has arrived. We have discussed in our broadcast that as early as November, Putin's war expenses will begin to decrease, and next year they will decline at an accelerated pace.
What definitely won't decrease in Russia are the prices. They are rising and continue to rise. This is a direct consequence of the war, which is felt most acutely by the poorest segments of the population. But Putin continues to pretend that there are no problems in Russia. At the Valdai Forum, he stated, sanctions, quote, have completely failed. Price tags in stores, lines at gas stations, new taxes, and hundreds of thousands of Russian men killed in the war. According to the dictator, Russians have never lived so well. Natalia Gusak, Vladimir Shtangelov for Freedom TV channel.